what at this point strategically necessary and what today, in these circumstances, when everybody discusses the Minsk and the ceasefire, which could be very temporary, could be done?
I think the ceasefire, having been the very basis of this supposedly new security architecture that some people talk about, it is absolutely a sine qua non. It is a precondition to anything else. The shelling and the import of heavy armaments across the Ukrainian border must be stopped. I think there must be international supervision and patrolling of the border between Russia and between Ukraine. It is elementary, and somehow it has to be ensured. The United Nations, unfortunately, because of the Russian veto, is completely paralyzed and unable to do it. I still have some hopes of the OSCE, although there again it's very difficult to get a unanimous decision. I think the European Union at least has a better chance of taking some steps, but it's of course reluctant to interfere in what has become a conflict between two countries. The idea that this is an internal problem of Ukraine is ludicrous, although it is being, of course, broadcast and repeated, and many in the West would like to believe that it's a Ukrainian problem and Europe has nothing to worry about except the refugees flooding in. Europe has a lot of things to worry about, including, I think, the security of its borders, because the borders of Ukraine have been breached, its territory has been invaded, and Europe since the Second World War should remember that this is the most serious thing. If we think back on the events of 1938, 1939, we should not allow this to happen just by looking on and sitting back and saying, well, that's not our problem.
And if technically you said that it's very important to have to hope for peace, but also to be prepared. And what does it mean for NATO, for the military, for the governments?
We heard from several generals that there's a room for improvement. Countries have to invest more in their defense. There has been a movement, a pacifist movement in Europe saying, oh, the world is such a wonderful, peaceful place now, we don't need defense, and we see clearly every day around us that it is not a peaceful place and not likely to be in the near future. We have to be able to defend ourselves. And that means investing in defense. It means also preparing for new forms of warfare where information and disinformation and propaganda play an extremely important role. Destabilization as well as military invasion and military attack play an important role, and we have to think about those. For instance, the freedom of the press, which gets abused by countries that absolutely have control of their media from the central government in a way that does not allow freedom of the press.
There is now a lot of talks that Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, would travel to the United Nations and would give their address, and there is a whole talk about Russia's role in fighting ISIS, and that could be kind of another place that Russia would play the role of somebody who wants to save the world from ISIS, and being really calm at this point. That probably because of that the government, the European governments can lift the sanctions. What would you say on that? Is there this idea? Is this trust?
I think that word trust has been misused to such an extent that we should practically strike it from our vocabulary. There is not trust when you get stabbed in your back. It's as simple as that. And to talk about re-establishing trust with somebody who's cutting heads or sending rockets at your cities and so on is ludicrous. That President Putin will not try to play Father Christmas and offer his services. I am sure that he will do something of the kind. I would like the world to remember that if they want to bargain and get the help and collaboration of Russia, which everybody reminds us, then please do not do it at the expense of others, be they the Ukrainians or anybody else. Let them do at their own expense if they wish to make concessions to Russia, but not at the expense of other countries who happen to have the misfortune of having been borders with Russia.
And last, Ms. President, I've been a lot this year in Riga and talking a lot to the Latvian journalists, answering the questions about Ukraine, particularly talking a lot to the Russian speakers in Latvia. So there is this feeling that a lot of Russian speakers really believe in what the Kremlin says, and even living in Riga would speak all about the troubles in the European Union and would have, let's say, the point of view of Putin understanders. What can be things done by the Latvian state, and what do you think also how you can avoid, because there is some kind of sentiment the people of the Russian speakers in Latvia, yeah, and probably what have been done by Latvian government, and what you think could be improved in order to engage the Russian speakers in Latvia?
We have done a great deal to engage the Russian-speaking population of Latvia, but I am told that Russia presents very good television programs, good comedy, good detective series, soap operas, very exciting, and then a dish of propaganda from morning to night, which is very effective. We have freedom of the press. And this is one of the challenges of Europe, not just my country, but all of Europe. If we have open, free press, and somebody comes in with deliberate misinformation and propaganda, how can you counter it? This is one of the challenges I think that Europe will have to solve within the next year or two.
But I still would ask, as a statesman, what also there would be things from your experience that probably you could have made differently. Talking now about the Ukrainian government also have to engage the population with already different ideas. Doesn't matter if they were artificially created and if the people had bought some of the Kremlin propaganda. But you see that the division had happened both in Latvia and as well in Ukraine. What would be your advice also for the politician, maybe to avoid some mistakes which could have happened?
Any society that is pluralistic and democratic will accept that people have different opinions, just as they have different DNA and different genetics. This is not a tragedy. It is something that we accept as a fact of life. The only thing that is needed from a citizen living in a particular geographic country within its borders is to be loyal to that country. If they can be loyal to that country, they belong to that country. If they are disloyal to that country, they should move to wherever their heart lies. And thank God we don't have an Iron Curtain anymore. Anybody feels unhappy in Europe, well, they're free to move. So many people seem to be wanting to move into Europe, but of course anybody who's unhappy in Europe can always move out.